Hi, I'm Susan Shaner with Sage Leadership Strategies, and I'm your host today of Community Forum. And I have the great pleasure, my guest today is Alice Hutchinson, who is a former First Selectman of Bethel, as well as currently an entrepreneur and small business owner. Welcome, Alice.
Thank you, Susan, for having me.
Thanks for coming on the show.
Of course.
So you transitioned from serving the community, but you're still serving the community in a way. So you currently own Byrd's Books, a bookstore in Bethel. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how you became an entrepreneur, small business owner, and why this particular business.
Well, if I might tell you just a little bit of history, my mother bought my sister's bookstore in Westport, Connecticut, and owned a New Age bookstore called Pymander Bookshop. And it was a store that she purchased at 55 years old and kept it till she was 84 when she sold it to someone, a working business, and it moved from Westport to Norwalk. And it was a bookstore in the era of bookstores. And it wasn't Barnes & Noble or Borders that gave them trouble. It was really the sidelines were bought by Whole Foods and so forth. So it became a really very popular store. And then when it moved to Norwalk, got a whole new audience. So I managed her music department. She never had any music in the store before, and it became wildly popular. And I was seasonal help, and I raised my children in and out of that business.
Oh, wow.
So I had other jobs, but I also helped my mother run her store over the holiday seasons and got a taste of, just a little taste of what a niche in a certain industry would be like. And then when they were opening the Barnes & Noble in Danbury, I was on the opening team. I got the mommy job. I had little tiny kids, and I worked there from 10 to 2 during the week with little children and dropped them off at school, or they went to school and I went and worked in an industry that had a happy time. I mean, it was a very happy time working in retail at that time, particularly books, because there were 4 times the inventory that any store has now and a lot of employees, and it was a really fun time. Bookie people, always a discussion.
Book people, yeah.
Well, it's
certain kind of person.
It is a certain kind of person, and librarians understand this too. People that love literacy and get passionate about a new thing and a new book coming out, want to talk about it, you know, and it was really pre-internet and certainly pre-internet sales. So people used libraries and bookstores as a real source for what's new, what's old that I haven't read. It was a very popular time for literacy. Great things were coming out, but it was also early enough that things like Oprah would come out with a new book on her show, and everyone would scramble and realize they had one copy, you know, that kind of thing.
Well, also, I mean, a sense of community, because you could go to the bookstore, peruse the stacks, and just kind of hang out. And it was
Very
also
much
at the
so.
time when they were starting to have little coffee shops there too, right?
And most do.
Yeah.
I've discovered in, particularly for bookstores, but I think a lot of retail is beginning to discover that it is community that builds it.
Yeah.
That many stores will have an adjoining cafe. In our particular situation, it doesn't really work that well because we have great breakfast shops either side of us.
Yeah.
We also have a lot of restaurants in Bethel, so that was not an option for a combination. So when it came, backing up, working in a big corporate environment like that taught me a lot about the industry as an industry. And so I put it aside for a while and got involved in planning and zoning in Bethel and became First Selectman for a term and really loved it and ran for state senate for just a bucket list thing to do because I felt very strongly about it, but I wanted to leave that stone, I wanted to leave no stone unturned. So when I finished that, I really mined my feelings for what was something that would bring something to Bethel and fulfill me at the same time. And it kept going back to books.
kind
And
of
literacy.
your roots. I mean, I will say, so I grew up in Westport. I knew that bookstore, that Pioneer Minute bookstore that your mom started. And it was really ahead of its time. It was a New Age bookstore before there were New Age bookstores.
Unless you were in California.
Yeah.
Yes, you're right.
And it had all sorts of, it wasn't just books, it had all sorts of other knick-knacky kinds of things there, I remember.
And my mother started it almost as, it'll be a hobby, something that I can do. And it turned into something very meaningful for her because she obviously started it at 55. She had rocks and crystals where there were these Native Americans that would wander in, having been in Arizona, and say, Nancy, look what I got. For you. I mean, she had relationships with people all over the country that came in with very special things that had spiritual significance in another culture, that had meaning for other people and other traditions. I mean, we had discussions about Kabbalah, we had discussions about Eastern thought, we had discussions about, Christianity, and people were coming in talking about what fulfilled them and what book could help get them there. And so my approach to...
Did she start out that way?
No.
So she started out saying, I just want a bookstore, and how did it sort of evolve to this bigger-than-life thing?
People, again,
with all these other products.
You didn't have Facebook, you didn't have any of the internet. Word of mouth and newsprint papers, Westport News and surrounding area little newspapers, the word got out. People that are looking for something to find fulfillment will find it. And so word got out through, but also events. You also have to realize that many retailers have discovered now that having an event, people are event driven now. They will go to something to experience something, or bring their children to something, or to eat something new, or to listen to new music, or to just, they want the experience. And so
you got the experience of helping your mom run the bookstore, but like a mom and pop shop, really. I mean, it was independent bookstore.
Very much.
And then you got this whole other experience at Barnes and Noble. So what were your biggest takeaways from this mom and pop shop and then this corporate experience?
Well, some of them were practical, because a mom and pop shop, I had to learn how to order from publishers. That was back in the day where you faxed your order in.
Yeah, well, does anybody still have a fax machine?
But books in print, for instance, were about 5 volumes this big, and you had to buy the books for all of the books that were in print.
That's crazy. Doesn't it seem crazy today?
Think about that. My mother's entire inventory was on index cards.
Wow.
So you knew when it was out because the index card had been, you checked them off at the end of every day.
Yeah.
So the labor is completely different. What you assign people tasks to do is completely different.
It's all automated
than a digital.
now.
It's automated, but you still have to make choices.
Yeah.
But your choices are then realized a little bit differently. In a corporate environment, you do none of the buying. You are there to facilitate what is there. And someone has done a thematic, and it's still true for corporate book selling in general. Someone else does the buying, someone else makes a plan for the merchandising, and someone makes the decision as to how it's going to be displayed and represented to people. Very different from you making all of those decisions yourself down to what books you're going to buy.
Yeah.
So there's a freedom to corporate book selling because you don't have to make those decisions, but then you're finding that you may not like what they have on the shelves.
Yeah.
So when it came time, really what drove me to open a store, Borders closed. Borders closed. And everybody I knew went through mourning that was a bookie. Bookie people wanted that sit around, talk about community, get together with an author, sit at a table and read a book.
Well, they had that. I mean, they had the coffee shop, they had the events, they had, so that was a whole different...
There's a huge number of reasons why they don't exist anymore. Some of them were bad decisions about not getting out of music and movies early enough. They had a whole second floor, in particularly the one that was local for us, that was full of inventory that people had all started to move into digital.
Yeah, I remember that.
And so that was a failure for them, and they also had a machine, the Kobo, that couldn't compete with other e-readers.
So you decided when they closed, I mean, you were thinking about, okay, what's next? What's, you know, I'm not in the Senate. I want to do something that's going to contribute to the Bethel community. And you thought,
so let's
why
dip
not
a
a
toe
bookstore?
in the water.
Yeah.
And Molten Java was moving from its former location across from Famous Pizza
Yeah.
over to the Victorian in Dolan Plaza. And Wendy Cahill, the owner, was looking for someone to go in on the second floor. And she was thinking a bookstore. And I was thinking a bookstore. But what I didn't have any sense of, since I had been a bit of time away from the book industry, was whether everyone was reading digitally and I was just out of the loop, or whether people still bought books. And she had 450 square feet that she let me rent from her. And it worked out really well, and both of us loved it, and it worked well for a time until I needed to break away from being as, first of all, the second floor isn't handicap accessible, which you don't have to be if you're under 1,000 square feet. But it was becoming popular enough that people were calling me and saying, can you deliver my book downstairs? And I thought, you know, yes, of course I can, but that can't go on forever.
Yeah. So it was good enough for you in terms of at the beginning to just experiment with this concept of could a bookstore
exactly.
Is it viable? Is it profitable enough?
Is it
could I make a go
desired?
of it?
Is it do people in our community want a bookstore? And it was enough of a yes for us to go from 450 square feet on a second floor down the street to 1,300 square feet.
Well, that's almost 3 times.
But you had to make room for what the industry calls sidelines or gift items, because books do not have very much of a discount. So in order for you to actually make it in the industry, you have to have gifts and cards, because those lines have higher profit in them.
Well, because I'm wondering, in terms of being an independent seller these days, especially with Amazon, I mean, how can you make a go of it? It's only through these sideline gifts?
Yes, but also that is the $65,000 question. I mean, that is that's the elephant in the living room. It is all of us constantly face the reality that Amazon's here. And that people use it.
Not going away.
It's not going away. And there's a couple questions. One, why it's not considered a monopoly that's regulated.
That is a good question.
But that's every bookseller, every bookstore owner just throws that one out and asks their congressman whenever they're around of how did we get so big and how much of the industry are we going to let them take? And the food industry must be having kittens right now because it's going to completely change that industry.
Right, yes, with their merger,
But what we've discovered by and I mean we, the American Booksellers Association is an association of independent booksellers, and I proudly am a member. A division of that is the New England Independent Booksellers Association, and we talk all the time. How do you do this? What's your feeling on this? How do you advertise? How do you market? What do you do? And there's a dialogue, a chatter that goes on constantly, and it's a brotherhood of bookstores.
So it doesn't seem like that you're competing with each other, even
Not
though
at
people
all.
will order books because it's a local thing?
No, as a matter of fact, there have been people that have wanted to do events in Ridgefield that have come to me to be the local bookseller, and I said, there's an independent bookstore in Ridgefield. You ought to call Books on the Common first. If they don't want to do it, of course I'd be happy to do that for you, but ask your local indie first. And sometimes it works. I mean, everyone sort of does that for each other. We really want to make sure that you don't step on your sister's toes.
Well, because it seems like in this day and age it would be very difficult to stay viable.
Events. It's all about events.
It's events and it's about the sideline
absolutely
products.
Events. We have events with authors in the store. We have events with authors in restaurants. We have events with authors off-site. And people will ask us to come vend books at a lecture or a movie or something like that. And that's how you do. It's community, Susan. It's really just community.
Yeah, so I'm curious because, so your first experience was with your mom's store, then you were an employee of a corporate store.
Yep.
But now you're a small business owner, which is very different.
Very different.
I mean, you own the business, you're making all the decisions. So
Yes.
what were some of your greatest challenges in starting it up? You didn't even buy it, you started this up.
We started it up from the ground up. I knew how to order books. That was a big thing.
That's a good thing to know.
It's not a small thing. It's a bit, you know, it's a very big deal. And I asked a lot of advice for a long time. I did a lot of stumbling, and I never thought I would stumble as hard as I did. Some of it I bought wisely. Some of it it's how you buy, what you buy.
Like, how do you know what to buy?
First of all, you have representatives from all the publishers that come and have conversation. And they will help cater your order. I had one this morning, and they help cater your order away from what the corporate stores are buying into what the independent bookstores seem to be working toward. I mean, that's all inventory. It's any inventory. I have the same thing with my stationery lines and my card lines and other things.
But you have to know your local
you know
market.
your local reps too, and sometimes the reps are for me and the toy store across the street. So one of the things that we've started doing in Bethel, which I love, is about every 6 to 8 weeks, those of us right in the downtown area, the toy store and the gift shops and the couple of jewelry stores, we have a morning meeting.
Oh, so
Where
you're
are
not
you
selling
advertising?
the same products?
Exactly. When I'm pitched a new card line, that I go to the two or three local stores that have them and go, do you have this? And they say no, I said then I'm good to go. If they say yes, I'll say what part of the line are you getting? All of it? Or no, you can take that. Okay, we really work hard never to carry the same things.
Well, that's good.
And it's fun.
So it's a little co-opetition there.
We need to be cooperative at our buying.
Yeah.
And we're different stores, and it's a little town, and you don't need to compete.
Right.
You just don't.
Yeah.
So it's a real refreshing thing, and that sometimes we cooperatively advertise in local news. There's a local newspaper in our neighboring municipality in Newtown. The digital presses sometimes.
So what's been your greatest challenge in starting and running this?
Overbuying and staffing appropriately. Because if you staff too much, your profit margins go away. If you understaff, then you don't have enough help. And people get frustrated because they can't get what they want when they need it.
Yeah. What have you been your greatest learning, and where do you feel like you've really got it down and you're really succeeded?
I love the events. I love the events.
How do you know what events to run?
That happens almost by accident. It's very serendipitous. There are publishers' representatives that will call and say, this is a Connecticut author that is going to be on a book tour in your area in this time frame. Do you want a signing? And sometimes it's a match, and sometimes it's not.
Oh, so you'll be like, that book's not going to sell here, or I'm not selling that book?
And that happens. Or it's the other bookstores or the other locations are a little bit too close to us, so we're stealing from the same market. So let them have this one, and I'll take this one, and we'll just kind of...
So you got to go on faith that it's going to come back to you in a way. I mean,
It does.
Yeah, that's amazing.
We had the best event at the holiday season last year. I pitched an event to the publisher for Dory Greenspan. The chefs had a new book out called Dory's Cookies. And we had a 5th birthday party coming up for the bookstore. And I said, let's do a bake-off.
Oh, fun.
We had 26 people bake cookies from Dory's Cookies. Dory came and got to taste her cookies made by non-professionals.
Right.
It was awesome.
Did she like any of them?
Yes. And she had criticism, and she had constructive criticism. And then we sold little baking boxes where people could take the cookies, and the purchase of the box supported Dawes the Animal Shelter.
This is a win-win for everybody.
It was a win-win for everybody. So those are the kinds of things that appeal to people.
Yeah.
There's a charity component. There's a serendipitous component. You didn't have to bake if you didn't want to, but Dory was there to sign her books, and everybody was happy, and it was a fun birthday. And we're working on something like that for this year.
Do you take requests? I mean, you learn from that. That one went well. Like, how do you kind of decide what events and shape up your calendar? Do you do it quarter to quarter, or?
It comes usually about 3 months before the event. Someone will contact me and say this book is coming out. we'd either like to do a straight signing. A signing is a non-book talk. They just come in and sign their books. Most authors want to talk about the process. And that's really interesting because how people get published is as different as the people are.
Yeah.
That is
so do you have like a gem of a story that was like really interesting and unique about how somebody got published?
There's a lot of them, but I will say that there's been a lot of buzz on Wrinkle in Time because the movie's coming out.
Yeah.
It took her 24 shots before she got published. She submitted 24 times.
Well, didn't, who was it, Richard Bach? I just remember him, Jonathan Livingston Seagull, didn't he say like, I don't know, it was like some ridiculous amount, like 1,000 or something, I mean, hundreds of.
It's more common than you know. It takes
Right?
someone usually 2 to 4 years to get published.
And isn't it even more difficult these days because they want you to have a platform and.
Yes. But there's a big advantage to getting your book published through a publishing house as opposed to self-publishing. What most people don't realize is the expense in terms of monetary and time of self-publishing, and that a lot of independent bookstores can't carry them.
Really? I didn't realize that. Why is that?
The problem is that most people who self-publish will sell to all of their friends first and then approach a bookstore, and the market's gone. And because we're not collecting libraries, I carried self-published books for nearly 3 years and sold 2 copies.
Of any self-published book?
The entire section.
Oh, wow.
And the reason is people then, they brought it to the bookstore, but then they didn't follow up with what has become common in social media to say, my book is over here.
So they have to be the one to do the marketing?
Yes. So if they publish, they're paying to have the book printed.
Yeah.
They're paying, in many cases, if it's any good, they've paid to have it edited, and they've paid to have it set up, and then they pay to market. And so, where does it become beneficial to wait the extra time, maybe get an agent, maybe go through a conventional bookseller, a book publisher, that will then publish your book for you and market it for you.
Yeah.
You then have to go on tour.
Yeah, no matter what.
Wouldn't that be a problem?
So are you're right. It's a nice problem to have.
Yes.
So it sounds like, are you not carrying any self-published books?
What we're trying to do is when we have Summerfest and Winterfest and some of the other occasions, we will call self-published book authors in to just sign their books during the events. If they want us to do any publicity on it, we take a cut. But we're trying to work out a way to accommodate the support for local people.
Right.
It's a real catch-22 for us.
Because that's your platform. I mean, you're local,
I have
independent.
to pay the rent, so I can't just give it away to people that'll have 3 people show up, and I've done all this publicity, and it's marketing for us. It's labor, and it's so we're trying to find a way. We really want to accommodate that market, but we want to do it so that everybody has something that they come away with.
Yeah.
That's
makes
really
sense. It's fair.
The most important part.
So I think you've been around, what, 5 or 6 years now?
5.5, 6 will be December 11th.
Okay.
And we've already got our holiday baking book ready to go.
So you're over the hump. I mean, most small businesses,
yes,
2 to 5
unless
years.
you consider our move start reset, because we moved 18 months in.
Which is amazing.
So now 3.5, almost 4 years in this, 4.5, about 4 years in this location.
Yeah.
4.5, yeah. So we now are hitting, to your point, I feel right now like we now begin to understand what we're doing.
And so how would you summarize that in terms of what you've learned and where you're at and where you want to take it?
That my industry is community events driven, that people want to know their authors. People want to know about their books. They want to know how it affects their children. They love literacy, and I'm happy. I mean, I do events at the library too, because I really am very strong about literacy and children and reading and enjoying good discussions. There's so many good stories out there.
Yeah. So do you have like your favorite pick that even somebody could pick up at the library, your favorite pick for like a summer read for?
There's 2 different books I would suggest. One is my favorite pick, and one is a book called Lincoln and the Bardo by a man named George Saunders, who wrote 10th of December, which is a short story compilation. But this particular book, the bardo is a Buddhist term for that place where you're stuck between being alive and wherever it is you go.
Oh.
And
that's
so
interesting way to
Lincoln
put it.
goes to the grave site to visit his son's grave because Abraham Lincoln lost a child.
Yeah.
And all of the spirits in the cemetery are trying to help the boy move on, but he's staying there to see his father.
Oh.
But that's not the only thing that it's a stunningly written book, and it's much cooler than the way I'm describing it. The audio is the first audiobook ever made with 166 voices. There are 166 actors, one for every character, including Nick Offerman, David Sedaris, Jeffrey Tambor,
Oh my gosh, that's incredible.
Julianne Moore, Susan Sarandon, and Don Cheadle. The list goes. Lena Dunham. I mean,
So what's the name of it again?
Lincoln in the Bardo.
Okay.
And it hit the New York
Great.
Times. It's very popular, but the audio, and we have an audio service, but Lincoln in the Bardo, with all of those voices, one for every character.
That's incredible. So if
That's one of my favorites for the summer.
That's
and you can
fantastic.
work out while you're listening, so you
Okay.
can take your
No,
walk
that's
outside.
Great. So we've got like maybe another minute. So if somebody was, I don't know, thinking of going into publishing or being a small business owner, just given everything, this journey you've been on, what advice would you give them?
Remember where you are, remember who the people are around you, and never try and do it alone. Because I say one of the great things about the business that I'm in is the town of Bethel. Because Bethel is a wonderful community, and a community will rally around a great business because they want to see it succeed. And the generosity of the people in the town of Bethel, just from a supportive standpoint, has been everything. So never ever try and do it alone. Always bring your friends along, because it means everything. I've had think tanks in my store where people I never thought would show up help me noodle the next step.
Wow.
It's really important to include people in whatever it is you choose to do, whether it's retail or business or whatever, because it makes the journey, it has value to it.
So if anybody had any questions or maybe they wanted some advice, how might they contact you?
The best way is by email. My email is actually Alice, A-L-I-C-E, at byrdsbooks.com, and Byrd is with a Y, because
Okay.
that's my middle name.
Okay.
B-Y-R-D-S.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Susan Shaner with Community Forum. Until next time, thank you for joining us.